Good evening. Welcome to Under the Dome podcast. I'm Alan Ulrich, and I'm here with my sidekick. Go ahead, Sean.
Sean Williams, how are you guys
There we
doing
go.
tonight? Glad to have you all with us again this week. We got the ball rolling last week, and we want to thank everyone for all the support and all the kind words and uh, for watching us over this week. And we hope that you liked what you've seen and continue to do so. We got a good show for you tonight. But we do want to once again thank Fan First Productions for sponsoring our show. And if it weren't for the fans, it's just a game for kids.
Absolutely. We'd like to thank all y'all for tuning in and watching us and giving us the positive feedback because that's good. Sometimes you feel like you're just talking to empty space. It's good to hear from people. All right. Saints have landed in the Greenbriar. So we're going to talk about that. But the first thing we're going to talk about is some of the stuff that's going around the league right now. Uh, you know, player suspensions being reduced. Some players getting second chances. Some players looking for a second chance. Le'Veon Bell from the Steelers getting suspended. So let's go ahead and get started. Talk about first with the Saints. Before we get into those other ones, the Saints have 4 players on the PUP list, and I just read this evening that Vincent Brown, short stay with the Saints, he's already on IR, out for the year. The other ones on the PUP list are not people that's too surprising. Keenan Lewis, probably still recovering from that hip surgery. And the doctors probably haven't cleared him yet, so he is probably going to be coming. I would guess probably the next couple of weeks he'd probably be out there. One that did surprise a lot of people is Teron Armstead. I read today that Mike Triplett over on ESPN said that it's a soft tissue issue. So it could be anything from a deep bruise to a bone bruise or something like that. And then the last one is the one I kind of find a little unusual is Kiaka is still listed as on the PUP list and not on IR with a torn ACL. That's usually a 9-month recovery. I'm surprised, number one, if he hasn't had surgery yet, when's he going to have surgery? Number two, why is he still on the PUP list, not the IR? What do you think, Sean?
Well, that's something that I find intriguing as well. As you and I were discussing earlier today, it makes you wonder if, first and foremost, is there going to be surgery involved in it? And number two, what is the severity of the injury? Is it a tear of the ACL? Is it a strain of the ACL? Because obviously the differing severity is going to be
Everything I've been reading so far, it's been a tear of the ACL. So a tear, even if it's a partial tear, that's still, it's an injury. You're out for the year. I don't know what they're trying to do, unless they think somehow that's really not torn. My daughter played basketball, and she's had her fair share of knee injuries. Now, she's never torn an ACL, but they have had injuries. She's had injuries where they just try to rehab as opposed to doing surgery. So I don't know what the thinking is behind that. That is something that we're going to have to watch probably over the next couple of weeks in camp and see if he's even out there watching, if they have him out there working, with a trainer, if he's on the bike, what is he doing? So
Sure. And it makes for some interesting for lack of a better way of putting it, it makes for some interesting job opportunities for some other guys.
That's going to be something we're going to talk about in a little bit. When we talk about the storylines heading into camp, who is going to be the number one guy to replace Kiaka as the jack of the pass rusher? That's going to be a battle that we're going to have to watch all preseason long. And I think it won't even be solved in preseason. I think we'll be seeing this going throughout the whole season, where you're going to see
Who
rotating guys depending on who's the opponent and what's the situation. Who's going to come in as that outside pass rusher?
who do you see as the odds-on favorite to at least begin the training camp in that jack position?
I think you're going to see in the base defense, you're going to see probably, um, depending on the situation, probably either Guacham on passing downs, and you probably will see. I can't think of the other guy's name right now.
Bali?
No, no, no. Richardson, Bobby Richardson. I'm sorry, Bobby
Oh,
Richardson
okay.
on the running downs, and then they're going to try and work in Davis Tull.
Uh,
Uh,
now, Alan, clarify for me. Wasn't
mhm,
Kakaha in, at least on paper, because that's basically all that we have to go on at this point. On
mhm.
paper, wasn't Kakaha slated to be moved from the outside linebacker position more or less to the defensive end position,
Yes,
like he played
yes,
at Washington?
yes. They want to use him as a DE, not as an outside linebacker anymore. So that chances are that means he's going to have his hand in the dirt a lot. They may stand him up depending on the formation. And this is the thing you have to understand about Dennis Allen when he's got to work with here. You've got, and we talked about this a little bit last week, you've got a lot of pieces all over the place. Guys who are more designed for a 3-4 defense, guys who are more designed for a 4-3 defense. Last year, when we signed Kevin Williams, that automatically made us a 4-3 defense because he was a 4-3 defensive tackle. He could not play the nose. He's not a three technique guy, so you had to play a 4-3 defense. With some of the other guys that we have guys who can fit in both. Davis Tull is probably more suited to be an outside linebacker in a 34 defense. The problem you've got, and this has been a fight I've had with people online and stuff when we're talking about going to a 34 defense, is the colleges aren't producing pure outside linebackers like they used to. There is no Ricky Jackson coming out. There is no Lawrence Taylor. And I'm not talking about that skill level and that ability, but we're talking about someone like a Pat Swilling, someone who is who is a pure linebacker, but can rush the passer. You don't have that really in college football. If you do, it's one or two guys. What you've got right now in college football, mainly because of the spread offense and the emphasis on the short pass and getting rid of it so quickly, and just spreading the defense out and running those quick hitters with the running backs, you've got defensive end tweeners, guys who are too small to play defensive end in the NFL level, the 300-pound or 280, 290 defensive end that you're used to seeing, or guys who are too big to be a typical linebacker. They're not the 240 guy. They're 275, 260. They're in that range. So they're a tweener. Or you end up with a undersized linebacker they use on the outside, somebody who is 6'2", 235. And I know I'm throwing out a lot of numbers and it sounds kind of confusing when it gets to that, but that's a difference in the way the game is played now compared to the 1980s, where you had a predominant of 3-4 defenses. So that's why the Saints are having trouble and have to have more of a hybrid kind of scheme, finding those outside linebackers who can play the run and rush the passer. Because you can get the defensive linemen. You can get the guys who can play two-gap defensive line on a 34 defense. It's those outside linebackers that are hard to find. Colleges just don't produce them with the regularity that they used to, 20 years ago, 30 years ago.
Has the specialization of the game made it too hard to fit the systems that they have now?
No, no, it's the design of the game now, the way the game is played. you now have so many different things they put into a defense and so many things they put into the offense. The zone blitz didn't exist 20 years, 30 years ago. Uh, you know, the you have much more of a basic, and I don't want to simplify it too much, but you have much more of a basic, simplified defense of this is the scheme I'm going to run. We'll come in with nickel, we'll come in with dime, but with situational football. Whereas today now you see much more hybrid stuff. You know, the Saints talk about running three safeties now, a big nickel essentially. So you've got a safety coming out to play linebacker. The Saints, you know, in a 4-3 defense, but they rush three and drop 8 off in coverage. That kind of stuff. You didn't see that 20 years ago. So that's what makes it hard. So you're trying to find more athletes slash, you know, specialized players, I guess.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay.
We kind of skipped over a little bit. I kind of led into we were talking about some other players around the league and kind of
Alan, before we get too far into this, I want to take just 1 minute, and we want to wish one of the major supporters of our program, Miss Jane Mayberry, a very happy birthday today.
Happy birthday.
Thank you so much for your loyal support. We hope
Thanks
you
for
have an awesome night.
Thanks for reading my very long-winded posts. I kind of get into a groove. I start replaying that game in my head. I've been putting these little lists together in the New Orleans Saints Facebook group of the top 10 worst games the Saints ever played, top 10 best. Right now we're in the best. And
which one of those lists was easier to make out?
Actually, believe it or not, the top 10 best is a harder one because, you know, I kind of end up a lot in this time period. You end up in the Drew Brees era. That's really a lot of great games in that era. When you start going back, you got a few in the Hazlitt area, skip over Ditka, and a lot in the Moore area that are really, really good. Oh, God, I don't even think about Ditka, you know, the reign of error. But, yeah, so rather than just keep rehashing, you know, hey, man, that Giants game from 2011 where we just killed them, that's an awesome game. Yeah, it is an awesome game. But let's talk about, I try to find games that had an impact on the future of the franchise. You know, the game I'm going to do tonight is the reopening of the Dome. It's the second. I have that ranked second. And the game itself.
That would be my vote for the most memorable game. As a matter of fact, I wrote an article last year about my most memorable Saints game ever, and that was it.
And it's really not even that good of a game if you watch it compared to the Saints games that happened later. But as I'm going to say tonight in the story, if you want to know when the golden age of Saints football began, it's that game.
Sure.
The Cleveland game, great. We won a game. Great comeback against Green Bay the next week. But that was the game where, you know, everything was – it was a reopening of the Dome, that emotional. And those kind of games in the past, the Saints would not meet expectations. They would struggle. You know, they'd look really bad and that kind of stuff. No, they came out there and took in the moment and made that a memorable game.
Who the Saints are began
exactly because
those games.
Right, because from that point on, this was no longer your dad's Saints or your grandpa's Saints. This was an entirely new team. And
exactly.
That started that magic run that ended up in the Dallas game, which was on that list. You know, the Eagles playoff game, which was an unbelievable game, that was on that list. You know, so, but my list, when I went back, I wanted to go back and include a couple of the Moore era games because they were important against the Steelers, where they get the first winning season, shut out the Broncos 42-0 in 1988. So yeah, coming up with the 10 best games was really hard. The worst games were a lot easier, believe it or not, because the worst games were.
There's a bigger body of work left from.
Yeah, the worst games, it's like, you remember natural disasters or car accidents. You just remember how you felt after that game. So
Well,
it was fun.
For
It was
Saints
fun.
fans, people talk about natural disasters, and you have to ask them to clarify: are they talking about a Saints season in particular, or are
Right.
they talking about a hurricane?
Yeah. Yeah.
It, it
And
was that
it
way for a long time.
it was. It was. I went to a lot of bad games. So, but yeah, that's a fun list. So then after the list is over with, I'm gonna do a my own projection of the all-time Saints roster for the 50th anniversary. Um, I'm trying to decide if I'm gonna do just starters or starters in depth. I think I want to do starters in depth because it brings out a lot more. Because if I just put Deuce McAllister and Drew Brees on there, well, I mean that's a given. But
Yeah,
Who would back up Deuce McAllister? Would it be Dalton Hilliard? Would it be Craig Hayward? Would it be for the quarterbacks? Would it be Archie, Bobby, Aaron Brooks? Who goes in after that? And I think that's going to be more interesting.
Heath
And then,
Schuler.
oh God, yeah, that would be my all-time worst defense, all-time worst offense. Heath Schuler, Albert
I'm sorry.
Connell, Brandon
I for,
Browner, Jason David, Andre Royal. Yeah, I could just go down the list. I mean, my God.
Russell Erxleben.
Oh, the Antichrist. You know, I am dead serious. You know the guy who picked Russell Erxleben, who was my high school counselor in 1981 after they cleaned house and they fired everybody. His name was Bob Whitman. I am not kidding. I could bring out my yearbook. I'll show you his picture. Now I'm thinking to myself, you picked Russell Erxleben and you're going to tell me what my future should be? You're out of your mind. There is no
Okay.
way. Yeah. All right. Enough of that. I could go on about old bad Saints games forever, but let's talk about.
We'll have to. Okay, we're going to go around the league now. As you
Yeah,
made
let's.
mention of earlier, Le'Veon Bell this week. Well, I don't know if it actually happened this week, but it was made public this
Yeah.
week that Le'Veon Bell missed a drug test for the Pittsburgh Steelers, and obviously, much as in the workplace in the real world, a missed test is
A failed test.
considered a failed test.
Yeah.
Also, along that same line, Randy Gregory of the Dallas Cowboys failed a drug test. Now, the only reason that seems to be possibly relevant is the fact that uh, he was flagged before the combine for a failed drug test as
If
well.
you show up, if you show up at the combine, which is the event that you're going to do to determine your draft status, and you fail a drug test there, there's no reason you should even be on a board because
Absolutely.
that's like showing up to a job interview, okay,
Smoking a joint.
with a blunt and you smell like alcohol. You're not going
Yeah.
to get the job. So
No.
yeah, it's
It's like I made reference to this afternoon in our little group there. To me, the scope of college athletics nowadays is so wide. And once you get beyond the first 10 picks of the draft, there's so little separation in the level that you're talking about, regardless of position.
yeah.
Anyone that cannot take it seriously enough to prioritize what is important in their life, they don't deserve to be considered to move
Look,
on to the next level.
and part of the problem is too is you've got a culture today that says, hey, weed isn't that bad. Weed's a natural product. We can cure all these diseases and stuff. And I'm not going to go into a legalization argument about weed or whatever. The problem is, and this is what college athletes don't understand, some college athletes and some other people don't understand, is just because it's legal or just because you think it doesn't do any good, I mean, it doesn't do you any harm, doesn't mean you can have it at a job site. Alcohol is a legal product. You can't drink and do a job. Uh,
Exactly.
Cigarettes
The
are legal products, but you can't smoke at the workplace from most places. You have to go outside and smoke. They have rules about these things. So,
There you go, right there. You said the key line. The bottom line in this whole discussion, it is against the rules. If you
right.
have rules, they're set up for a reason and a purpose, and
Well,
you
you know,
can choose not to obey them.
look, you had two Saints players. Well, you had more than two, but you had two Saints players who actually served as suspensions for using Adderall, which is a stimulant for people who have ADD or whatever. You have one guy, defensive tackle from the 2016, who had got suspended because he was using an inhaler for his asthma. Legal product, can't take it. Deuce
It
McAllister,
contains
Deuce McAllister, Will Smith, and Charles Grant got busted for Star Caps, which had a diuretic. It flagged it. You got in
yeah,
trouble for that. These are all legal products, but for whatever reason, it's listed as prohibited items by the NFL. They can set their own rules. So, when you have
absolutely.
these things happen, just because it's legal in Colorado, just because it does all these wonderful things for people, the league still has it flagged as an illegal product. Players can't take it. So, as a player coming in, you should know that. Stop doing it.
Sure, absolutely. The bottom line is it is against the rules of this league. And if you are going to be a paid employee of this league, which a player is, they're an
Mm-hmm.
employee of the New Orleans Saints, or add in whichever team you so choose. They are employees of that, but that is still under the umbrella of the National Football League.
Right. And well, speaking
And
of other
it's
other
against the
rules,
rules.
yeah, speaking of other rules, Greg Hardy's trying once again to get back in the league, and Ray Rice is begging to get back in. And listen, I listened to a sports radio talk show the other night, I should say, talking about Ray Rice, and wondering why he won't get a second chance in the league. And saying that everybody likes a redemption story, everybody likes the underdog coming back, and the fact that he wants to donate his salary to a battered women's shelter group or to support battered women, you know, it's all great PR stuff. Here's the real reason why Ray Rice isn't getting back into the league, and someone like Greg Hardy is getting another look. He's not getting back in the league because his last year with the Baltimore Ravens, I think his running point, his yards per carry average was like 2.2. Ray Rice is over 30 years old, hadn't played football in 2 years. Running backs have a very limited shelf life. Why would you put money, any money, even a league minimum, on a 30-something-year-old back when you can get a rookie or an undrafted free agent who probably can outplay him at this point? And it just doesn't make any sense. It's too expensive. He's too expensive for the return you would get on him, even at league minimum, compared to an undrafted rookie or a draft pick. And
Sure.
if you look around the league, running backs are quickly shuttled out.
Yes.
They don't have a long shelf life in the league. Chris Ivory, I think, is now gone from the Jets. He's with the Jaguars. So that's the real reason why Ray Rice doesn't get a shot. It's not just because of the domestic abuse. It's also his age, and they could see the decline in production. You're just not going to get a lot of production out of someone like Ray Rice. Whereas with Greg Hardy, he's a pass rusher. Okay, he's a young pass rusher. If you can get him for the league
You
minimum,
know, I've heard
go
this
ahead.
argument. I've heard this argument about how what Hardy did was much worse. What did okay? There's a few things
It
that you need to remember. Number one, what Ray Rice did was caught on video. perception in this world that we live in right now, perception is reality. The
If you see,
finality of seeing him hit that woman and knock her absolutely unconscious.
and
Now,
drag her out by her hair, drag her
yeah,
out of the elevator by her hair.
Greg Hardy, his entire case was a lot of he said, she said, he did, she did. There
Well,
wasn't a videotape of all of that.
you did have pictures of her with bruises and marks.
Yeah.
Yes, we live in a culture
But
where if it's, oh, go ahead,
here's
go
the
ahead.
here's the thing with Greg Hardy. He's not trying to get a second chance. Greg Hardy got his second chance with the Dallas Cowboys. And what did he do with that second chance? Long story, just one minor example. He almost came to fisticuffs on the sidelines with an assistant coach.
Yeah.
When he
Yeah.
was brought in, according to his owner, to be a leader and thus and such, he's not begging for a second chance. As far as I'm concerned, the heinousness of what he did should make him unemployable at this level. Now,
Right.
am I supposed to cry for Greg Hardy because he doesn't have the opportunity to earn a living? You did it to yourself.
Yeah.
Deal with it.
You're not entitled. You're not entitled to any job. You're not entitled to a job.
People nowadays in this entitled world that we live in, young athletes think that playing in the NFL is their right. It is not a right. It is a luxury that you work for, and if you're very, very fortunate and you do right and you cross the T's and dot the I's of everything that you're supposed to do, you get an opportunity. If you don't take advantage of that opportunity, or in these cases, you take that opportunity for granted, you don't deserve to have it.
Right. Well, listen. The two most important positions right now in the NFL are you have to have an elite quarterback to win, and
Absolutely.
you have to have a guy who can put that elite quarterback on his butt. And
Absolutely.
that is the only reason Greg Hardy is even getting a look over by anybody. And I think this is probably the last appearance he'll make in the NFL if he gets signed by the Jaguars. I think this will be his last appearance. I don't even think he'll get signed by the
I don't.
Jaguars.
That's what I'm about to say. I don't believe that the Jaguars are even going to waste time with him. I don't think that he's even up to the level of talent that the Jaguars have in camp as we speak.
No,
to be totally honest.
I don't either. But
let me ask you this, Alan.
Mm-hmm.
This discussion brings to my mind one question. Are we holding our athletes to too high a standard? Expecting them to be role models, expecting them to be holding them to a little higher standards than everyone else. I know Charles Barkley famously said before that he wasn't trying to be, whether you choose to or not, you are. You are in the public eye.
Let me ask you, I've heard that question before. Let me ask you something about that. If in your workplace, would you want to work with an idiot or a jerk? Would you want to work with somebody like that in your group? Somebody who undermines the group you work in. I work in an office where we have a group of people that all do about the same job, okay? We have one bad person in that group. It messes us all up. It makes it uncomfortable for us to be there. We don't want to work with him or her, work with him or her. Football, basketball, baseball, no matter what sport we're talking about, is no different.
Sure.
You want to have a good locker room. You want to have a good group who will bond together and work together because you're trying to construct a team. So, yes, they're not supposed to be role models for society, but You want good people who work for you because they are the face of your organization. Think about the Cleveland Browns with Johnny Manziel. What was the face of the Cleveland Browns when Johnny Manziel was on that team? It was failure, and every time you turn around, you're looking at Manziel. He's in the Las Vegas club. He's disguising himself to go out drinking. You hear he got drunk the night before a game. And I know all about Kenny Stabler. You know, I was a Stabler fan with the Raiders and stuff like that. That's a different era. That was
That's
not
not
the
even
era.
the same world that we live in now.
Well, you know, Kenny Stabler
You
used
didn't
to
have
always joke. Yeah, he used to joke all the time that he used to read the game plan by the light of the jukebox. You don't have that. You have 24-hour video footage of everybody. TMZ will find you wherever you go. So you now have to,
especially if your name is Manziel.
if your name is anybody. I mean, who broke the story about the Giants receiver who was with the Steelers, Plaxico Burress, who shot himself in the club? It was TMZ when he brought a loaded gun into the club and shot his own leg. Uh, you know, if
Sure.
you're an athlete, and this we told some players this years ago when I was in college, if you get arrested, okay, even if you get arrested because it's your friend doing something stupid, it's never your friend's name that runs in the headlines. It's always your name gets arrested or is involved in an altercation with police and one of your friends got arrested. So you have to know who you hang out with. And again, it brings it back to the locker room. You want to have good people in your locker room. So you're going to
Absolutely.
avoid the quote unquote bad people that make your team look bad, that provide distractions for your team, that the media is always following around, doing news stories on. That's why the Cowboys are the mess that they're in, which I totally enjoy, but that's beside the point. But that's why the Cowboys are a train wreck when you watch them play, because it's not anymore about, as much as the media tries to make it, it's not about how good the team is. It's about Randy Gregory failing the drug test. It's about Greg Hardy going after an assistant coach. It's about Terrell Owens when he was on the team. How long before he blew up, on the sideline? It's
Yeah.
those are the stories that happen. You no longer have that. You don't have that like a Pittsburgh Steelers kind of team where you have, there is no really controversy. Well, Roethlisberger, but there's no real controversy about the franchise. It's a very stable franchise. Or the Saints,
Yeah.
outside of Gillette, can you really think of some players who just totally lost their mind and were getting arrested by the police, or the police were coming to their house? You didn't have those kind of stories much
No.
during Sean Payton's and Drew Brees' era. You
Yeah.
don't have, and that's what how I look at when you talk about having a role model on a team. You don't want to have those kind of people on your team. Um,
Sure.
so
Alan, we've asked on our Facebook page if anyone had any questions that they would like to ask us, and we had one that was rather intriguing that I'd like to put to you and see what your response is. Comes from Jeffrey Dooley, and it says, "Do you think the Saints' weakness wasn't necessarily Rob Ryan's defense, but the lack of having a real general manager, not a yes man
oh
for Sean Payton? Lack of
oh
quality player choices and the fact Drew Brees has no big name targets to throw to being one example."
wow, okay. That's like five questions at one time. Okay, all right. Number one,
Okay,
Rob
let's take
Ryan's
it by the.
defense. Yeah, let's look at Rob Ryan first. Rob Ryan has been a disaster almost everywhere he's been, except for the 2013 Saints. 2014, 2015, you got 10 men on the line. You got 10 men on the field. You have 12 men on the field. You've got timeouts being called because the right personnel aren't in there. This started last year at the black and gold scrimmage, and it was the same thing 2 years ago. So is it? And they kept talking over and over. We're going to simplify the defense. We're going to simplify the defense. Well, players aren't that stupid. You know, you know when you're supposed to be on the field.
Sure.
How many blown coverages did we see in 2014, 2015, where receivers just wide open because people aren't talking to each other? You know, so I put that on Rob Ryan. I put the miscommunication. I put, you know, poor personnel grouping packages on Rob Ryan. I put those kind of mistakes on Rob Ryan. However, you can't say it's all Rob Ryan. I understand what he's saying about a lack of a real general manager. Mickey Loomis is the money guy. Mickey
Sure.
Loomis, his job is to manage the salary cap. Some will argue he's not doing a very good job with that either. Um, but our salary cap problems come from a multitude of things, least of all the Junior Gillette having to cut him. That's the bulk of a lot of the dead money. But we have a lot of issues. We had an aging team. You had a lot of players who are making a lot of money because if you have a good team, you want to pay everybody. Well, everybody wants to be the top paid player at that position. And then we've had poor drafts where we had to sign free agents to make up for the bad drafting. So that's why we have cap problems. Now, what would a real general manager be like? What you're looking for as a general manager is a talent evaluator. Well, as Bill Parcells said so famously, you know, if they're gonna make you the chef or you got to cook the dinner, at least they ought to let you shop for the groceries. Sean Payton's doing the shopping. Sean Payton and his coaches are doing shopping. They are picking these players. Ryan Pace, when he was player personnel director, he's now with the Bears, he was in there picking the players. I think we've had, number one, a collection of bad scouts, at least since 2010, 2009. We've had a collection of bad scouts. I thought the 2014 draft in particular was a horrible draft because we did a lot of reaching for players, a lot of panicking, I think Stanley John Baptiste was a classic example of panicking, grabbing that big receiver because you saw Carolina grab a tall receiver. Julio Jones is a tall receiver, and of course the Bucks have two tall receivers in Evans and Jackson. So you
Sure.
went out there and got a big receiver, thinking he's going to be the next Richard Sherman. So to answer his question, having a real general manager in there, like a Jim Finks kind of guy, I don't think he would still be on the same page as Sean Payton. So he has to be. He can't. They can't have disagreements and arguments about the draft because Sean Payton ultimately is the one who's going to want this team shaped in his image.
Sure.
So that's why Loomis and Payton work very well. What you do need, though, is a strong player personnel director. I'm not sold on Jeff Ireland. I think Jeff Ireland did a much better job drafting this year than last year's draft, but I'm not totally sold on him. We'll see how he works out as a player personnel guy. Remember, he was GM of the Dolphins, and the Dolphins have not been very good. So that's a complicated question. We're going to have to wait and see how this shakes out. I forgot to turn off my email. I apologize for that dinging. But anyway.
Just know you're important.
Yeah. Lack of quality player choices, that's Bountygate too. You lost a first-round draft choice because you traded back in to get Mark Ingram in 2011, so you lost the first-round pick in 2012, and also the Saints are always aggressive. They're always trading up, so you're burning more picks. If you look back, really though, the 2013 draft wasn't really as bad as people make it out to be. You got some decent players out of that draft. Not great players, not impact players. Akiem Hicks was probably a reach, but
Yeah,
that's more mental than it is physical because he has the physical ability. He's shown flashes of being that great defensive lineman. It was just more of a mental thing for him. He wasn't motivated enough. John Jenkins, same thing. Good player, but not a great player. He lets his weight gets in the way. Then he
sure.
loses motivation. He's almost like Grady Jackson in that regard. Um, so he's not a total bust who never played it down for the Saints like you had 2014. And the last thing, Drew Brees has no big name targets to throw to. What do fans always say? Drew Brees makes receivers, great receivers. Marcus Holston was a pretty damn good
Drew
receiver.
Brees makes big name targets.
Yeah, I mean, your big name targets from previous years, this guy here, Jimmy Graham, that was a big name target. Uh, you have to say, all right, you have to say Darren Sproles was a good target.
Sure,
Uh,
absolutely.
so I don't know, would a Larry Fitzgerald look great on this team? Absolutely. Larry Fitzgerald in his prime. Would the guy, the Giants, the ex-LSU player, OBJ, would he look like a good guy to have on this team? Absolutely. But you don't have to have that great big name star receiver. I mean, how many can you name all the Packers receivers, for
I
example?
I look at it a little bit. I look at it a little bit differently, Alan. I don't like when everyone was talking about bringing in Bolden. Bolden's the
Yeah.
type of guy that you're going to have to throw 8 to 10 or more passes to a game to really see the impact that he's making, especially at this point in his career where he's not going to catch and turn yards in after catch in.
Well, if we were
And
talking about
and
go ahead.
that's not Breeze.
Yeah.
Breeze is going to throw to at least 10 different receivers in the
Right.
course of a game.
Right. And if you want Breeze to spread the ball around, you want Breeze to make it difficult to defend because he's going to formation and scheme you to death. You don't have a big name receiver. You have a system. That's why I call Green Bay like the Saints mirror image. Green Bay's run exactly the same way. They don't have a big name receiver. Jordy Nelson, probably their best receiver. When he was missing last year, it hurt them, but they still got to the playoffs.
Sure,
They still won a playoff game. I mean, they don't have to have that star receiver either. And you're going to see a lot of teams going more to that kind of system as the years go on because it's a lot easier to develop a scheme where you isolate and you're looking for multiple targets because it puts more stress on the defense. If the Saints had a Joe Horn kind of receiver like you have with Aaron Brooks and you had some other guys, but Joe Horn was your Pro Bowl guy, the coverage rolls to Horn's side. You take Horn out of the game, you say, I'm not going to let Horn beat me. I'm going to make those other guys beat me. And that's how the Saints got beaten. Well, that and Aaron Brooks throwing backwards passes. But, that's how they beat the Saints back then, was they would beat the Saints by trying to take Joe Horn away. They would try and take Deuce McAllister away. You had to make Jerome Pathon, Dante Stallworth, or Dante Stolpepper, as Buddy D used to call him. You take those guys and make those guys beat you. Don't let Joe Horn beat you. And that's the
sure,
brilliance. That's when the Saints are at their best, when they
sure.
don't have that number one guy. Um,
Okay, um, moving right along, we we're looking at tomorrow the rookies report
yeah.
to the Greenbriar, which
Uh-oh. Are you frozen there? I think he's frozen. Okay. Rookies going to Greenbriar. They kind of get in there first. I'm kind of curious a little bit here. Um, They come in first. I think the reason why
and
oh, you're back.
hey,
You kind of
I,
froze for a minute there.
yeah, I got one of those a few minutes ago too.
Okay.
It's a
You were
good
saying
thing
about the
people love
rookies.
us, man.
You're right. You saying about rookies coming in?
The rookies report Wednesday, uh,
Hmm.
and I think Thursday are physicals, and practices are set to begin on Friday. Am I correct that?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Uh, in we want to get into tonight a few of the positions that people should be paying close attention to that will seemingly directly affect our season this year as we go. What do you see as the biggest positional battle in terms of its effect uh, on the season to come?
Uh, well, obviously defensive end. We talked about that one before. Who comes in as a pass rusher? Who has the good training camp? Who just totally dominates everybody on the line of scrimmage? That is a big one. And then, of course, the other side, the offensive line. Um, you know, who comes into those guard positions? Last year, you know, having Jari Evans in there and then Melito and Clemente playing, you had a lot of instability there. Streif got abused. Um, so who comes in? If Pete has to play that guard position, then you're going to have Streif play that tackle position. What happens on that side? So we have to see who of these undrafted free agents steps up and actually tries to make a play to get into that starting lineup. Um, if no one does, then we're going to be looking at the waiver wire. We're going to be looking at first cuts. We might be looking at a trade. Remember in 2006, Scott Shanley wasn't even on the Saints team until after the Dallas preseason game. That was the third preseason game. That was just starting outside linebacker. Um,
Sure.
so that is huge because if not those the positions, two guards, if you can't find somebody to play those two guard positions, that affects what Pete's going to do. That affects what Street's going to do. So that's the battle to watch. Watch
Let me
those
ask you.
undrafted guys.
Let me ask you this: Do you see which do you see as the closer to being reality? Do you see Streif lining up at right tackle and Pete lining up at one of the guards, or do
Yeah,
you see Pete beating out Streif before the
no.
season begins?
I think you're going to see Streif at right tackle. You're going to see Pete at guard, and you're going to probably see the winner of the Clemente, Melito, Turner, Young, whomever
Yeah.
at that left guard position. I think that's what you're going to end up seeing. I really don't think Peyton's going to be comfortable playing two undrafted free agents or two inexperienced guards at the two positions.
Okay. Cam Jordan is probably going to be one defensive end, I'm
Mm-hmm.
sure.
Mm-hmm.
Who's your best bet to start on the other end opposite Jordan?
And again, like we said in the beginning of the show, depends on the situation, down and distance. Probably base defense, you'll probably see Bobby Richardson in a lot. I think they'll try and work Watchman to try and see if he can be a run stopper as well. But, they're just going to be rotating people in and out. They're going to be changing that alignment a lot. They're going to go to that NASCAR package, they call it, where they'll put all pass rushers out there. You may see Jordan kick back into the inside, that kind of
Reminiscent.
stuff.
That's reminiscent of the old Giants line.
Yeah, yeah. I think you're just going to see a lot of fluidity there. You're not going to see four guys that are going to play all three downs out there. There's just going to be too much. They're
So
going to try and rotate people left and right.
okay, so basically the base defense is nothing. I don't know. I don't. Hang on. I don't know how to exactly ask what I'm wanting to say.
Your
The
base, your base
Go
is going to
ahead.
be a 40. Your base is going to be a 43 look. I just think that's what Allen is comfortable with. That's what he's going to try and do. But just because that's what you see on the television screen, when they introduce the defense to the television audience, that doesn't mean that's the defense you might even see out there at the time. Look at the defensive line the same way you look at the Saints wide receivers. That's really how you have to look at it, because Sean Payton runs packages left and right. You're going to
Sure.
see Cooks, like just say Cooks, for example. We'll make Cooks like the defensive linemen here. You're going to see Cooks at the X. You're going to see Cooks in the slot. You're going to see Cooks playing the Y. Depending on where they can isolate him, get the ideal matchup. That's the same thing you're going to see in that defense. You're going to see them move people around so they get the best possible matchup so they can
Okay.
rush that passer. And I think
Okay.
that's the way it's going to work.
I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay, you just made mention of the next grouping we need to look at.
Mm-hmm.
The wide receivers. Everyone knows Cooks is going to be there. Everyone
Yeah.
knows that uh, tight end
Oh,
Fleener
Felina.
will be there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, from there, on who you ask as to the personnel pairings and what have you that you get. What's your feedback on that?
Well, you got the top three positions already closed off on the receivers. It's Cook, Snead, and Thomas. The only
Sure.
question now is who's going to be the four. Coleman has the lead, with Vincent Brown being put on IR. That kicks him out of the equation. So now you've got R.J. Harris, you've got Dangerfield, you've got a lot of those younger guys. I think there's Reggie Bell out there. Those guys are now going to be vying for that fourth slot. And when we get into the roster breakdown, how many plays we have left, uh, we'll see whether or not the Saints keep 4 or 5 receivers. 4 receivers are active on game day. I don't know if they'll keep 5. Depends if somebody can make an impact on special teams.
Sure. Sure. Okay.
Uh,
Go ahead.
I was going to say, we're kind of running out of time here a little bit. Those are the 3 main position battles I think that we should look at, in training camp, at least on the opening days. You're really going to see when they put the pads on, which will be next week, the offensive and defensive line battles start in earnest. Receivers, we're going to see those in the preseason. Watch the second half of the preseason games. Um, as far as the other position battles, we can talk about this next week when we get into the linebackers and the secondary. It's not so
Sure.
much who the starters are going to be. It's going to be who fills out the other positions.
Absolutely.
Who are the guys going to be playing behind the starters, and how are they going to be used? And the
Absolutely.
same is true with the
I
running
think
back.
that with all of those that you just mentioned, in
Mm-hmm.
at least last year, it wasn't so much starters that made the difference as far as where we were lacking, so much as the depth behind them. So I think you're making
Right.
a very good point there.
Yeah, it's about depth now, and we could talk about those things, especially once they put the pads on and we see the opening practices, what they look like. Um, yeah, the Saints started Greenbriar. They landed today. Like you said, the first practice I think is Saturday morning.
Sure.
So and that's probably in shorts and shells. I'm looking forward to the first practice where they're hitting people. Uh, the
Yes.
best the best part about what's going to happen on Wednesday is from now until at least January, there's football news every day. Enjoy
Sunday
that.
Sunday night we've almost got a pseudo semi sort of vague resemblance of a ball game in the Hall of Fame game. Can you
That's
believe
all I'm
that?
looking for. I actually will sit and watch that for about 2 series, and then I'll start doing other things. But
That'll be the Packers and the Colts, correct?
right, exactly. Packers and
Okay.
the Colts, Hall of Fame game, and it should be fun. Yeah, I'm gonna watch a little bit, and then just to get football going. So, thank y'all for watching.
Uh,
Appreciate it.
Thank y'all
Uh,
so much for choosing to join us. Um, we look forward to seeing you guys next week. Until then, you can reach us by email at under the dome. Oh my goodness. I did it again. Under the dome podcast at gmail.com. You
thank you.
can reach us on our Facebook page, Under the Dome Podcast. If you're not a member, All you got to do is go on there, and we'll make that happen. And
Absolutely.
also follow us on Twitter at Under the Dome PO1.
Yep.
Uh,
I'm
we love you
79.
guys.
I'm 79 Saints on Twitter, so you can look for me on there.
I'm Drew's dad, 3721. Uh,
Thank y'all
we
so
look forward to
much.
seeing you guys next week.
Alrighty.